will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So welcome for joining us this afternoon on looking at developing creativity in writing across the key stages, key stage 1 and key stage 2. As always, I'd like to start with a quote, something just to get ourselves thinking about, and I thought this one was apt for today. Creativity is inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun. And I thought that is a perfect example and quote for creativity, because there is no set rule, there is no set way we must do things. It's about taking those risks and going with the flow as well. And that's what we need to remember when we're teaching our children as well. Break those rules where possible. So creative writing. Writing's about making those choices. And every time we ask a child to write, whether it be a narrative, a recount, or a non-fictional text, they're having to choose the most appropriate words, features, and how best to organize effectively to engage that reader. And again, there is a lot of processes that has to go into practice when writing. So for those children who are initially a weaker writer or they struggle, they are going to therefore be faced with a barrier to approaching creative writing as well. From an early age, children explore a variety of approaches in which people around them write effectively and creatively. So when we think about a child who is initially entering EYFS for the first time, they learn by watching, listening, and as they then move forwards, they start to read the text themselves as well. Thank you very much for letting me know. I shall let her in now as well. Now I have had there's no message telling me to wait in. Okay, if it's possible to just say to Mariam, just to log out and then log back in, because the option for me to add her hasn't come up my screen, so I can't allow her in. But if she enters again, it will then pop up on my screen to give her that permission as well.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So from an early age, children obviously they learn these stories by watching and listening adults, and then later on they read those texts themselves, and then that's where they then move on to understanding the mechanics of writing and how it can then inform, amuse, persuade, and incite strong emotions. However, along the way, children can get lost, and that's where the barriers can be formed, and therefore they then initially struggle when it comes to creative writing. Writing is much more than an act of putting pen to paper, and it's much more than knowing how to spell, use capital letters, or understand where to punctuate. And even though these are all important, when we focus on creative writing, it's about using that imagination, about drawing upon the things that we know, drawing upon our life experiences, looking at texts that we've been able to read, and be able to use that in our writing as well. So creative writing is through experience of talking, reading, sharing, and writing. The language and functions required are more specific to the different tasks that we ask children to do. For every writing purpose and for every writing audience, there are choices about the best and most appropriate structure to use. And we have to remember that every time we change that structure, children will initially struggle. So again, we've got to think of the best ways to overcome those barriers to the learning. In terms of a weekly lesson structure, this is our typical structure that we run at Leo schools, where we immerse children in the creative input. This could be through looking at a waggle, what a good one looks like, looking at a creative text. It could be exploring an extract from a text itself, and then moving on to the exploration of the genre itself. And this is, again, looking at the rules, the parameters that are needed within each of the genres. Then we'd start to plan, practice, write, and edit. And we do that consistently up until the 5th lesson, where children can then perform and have that purpose to their lesson as well. Now, when it comes to creative writing, that's where we have to be a bit more flexible with our timetable. and flexible with our structure, because what we would need to do is start to input various strategies and various activities to help develop children's understanding. And in some ways, we need to take it right back down to the EYFS Key Stage 1 approach, where children have to have that immersive play in order to develop their ideas as well. Shorter tasks to generate ideas, role play, art and audio, pre-teaching genres through the waggles, allowing children to focus on generating ideas, ordering their ideas, structuring them in a way before moving on to the writing approach as well. And then, as always, as the teacher, it comes down to that clear, careful and concise modelling. Sometimes we, again, I'm guilty of this, is we say to children, I want you to write, and they do so, but they're still not sure on that structure. And sometimes we have to actually physically show them the actual model that we wish them to use in their work as well. So, a couple of things to help set yourselves up for a creative environment is your classroom. So, over the next couple of slides, these are going to look at how you can ensure that your environment is perfect for a creative classroom. So, number one is always having a look at your working wall. Make sure that it's clear and it's uncluttered of unnecessary things that you need in there as well. Now, I've been guilty of this, especially in my first few years of teaching, is to put every single thing in the kitchen sink on the classroom wall as well. Have every single grammatical display sign, every single wow word. But actually, how many children actually look at those and use them? Furthermore, if you're sat at the back of the classroom, and like myself, you may not have the best eyesight, are you going to be able to see those things from a distance? So it's really important we think about what we put on our working walls and how they are best going to be used for every able learner. It's important that we regularly change and update to reflect the current learning. You may want to include examples of modelled big writes, modelled exemplar sentences, or modelled examples of the skills being taught and focused. And again, think about the size that you are putting those on when you're displaying them as well. Because again, if you're putting very small writing, fantastic. Good afternoon, Mariam. Welcome for joining us, and apologies for not being able to enter straight away as well.
Okay. Thank you.
This is being recorded and will be uploaded. So again, at the moment, all we've just gone through is just the basic mechanics. So we're just going to have a look now at all the strategies that we can put in place.
Thank you. Perfect.
So keywords, key vocabulary and key phrases. Again, make sure that they're size appropriate so that your children can see them wherever they are around the room. And again, regularly refreshing those to match the topic and the style of your writing as well. Including pictures, images and photographs are key because, again, it can generate that discussion. It can help generate ideas for children, and always including steps to success and success criteria as well. This is also a perfect example of where to include handwriting and how to model that for children. Other things which are really popular is those wow words, those word walls, where, you know, the vocabulary walls where you're showing alternate synonyms. These are fantastic to kind of use, but again, regularly refreshing them for what you need as well. Sometimes what I've done in the past with my working wall and my word vocabulary wall is before the start of an English lesson, I'd say to children, I want you to go up there and I want you to physically take one off the wall so it's not static. They can use it, have that card in front of you, and in today's lesson, that's why I want you to get into your work as well. So again, it's thinking about how you can make your classroom as friendly as possible for the children. Some people put them on pegs, some people have those little notes that you can pull out as well, and it's training the children on how to use those effectively in their writing. One thing I would say as a side note is if you ever decide to colour code your vocabulary into your word families, nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, etc., make sure you are consistent with those colour choices, because sometimes if you muddle them up throughout the year, for those more lower ability or those children who require colourful semantics, that can be quite confusing as well. These are very big. I mean, when I started teaching a very long time ago, VCOP displays were the thing, or the in thing as well. They seem to have kind of disappeared a little bit, but again, they're quite nice if you want to kind of promote specific grammatical skills as well. As you can see, it's very old because one of them says connectives, when it should now be conjunctions. So these are nice to have, but again, static displays are only purposeful if used by the children. If they're just wallpaper and they're there to make your classroom look pretty, what's the point of it? So just always ask yourself that. Have my children used it in the last week? Have my children used it in the last month? Have my children used it in the last 6 weeks? If the answer to those questions are no, then you don't need that display. So again, make sure that those displays are purposeful and that they're user-friendly for the children, because that will help generate ideas in writing. Another good thing is your classroom environment is the text that you show, your reading books, theming them, having themes throughout the year, theming them to your topic, even theming them to your big rights in your English lessons. By giving them a bank of books that they can go to, if they struggle, this can then be where you can direct them and say, look, you know, this is what we're doing this week. Why don't you choose one of these books? You might be able to glean or magpie some of these ideas from these set of texts as well. So again, you're directing them to those prompts into their, which they can then put into their writing as well. Classroom environments are also nice if you actually have a set area. Some people call this their editing station. Some people call this their English working station. But what it does, and Key Stage 1, again, they're fantastic at doing this, is having these areas where children can go and get these resources as well. They know where they are, they know where to find something, and they can use them as well. Whether it is word mats, whether it is vocabulary strips, whether it is using widget picture cards. It's nice to have all these in one place that children can then go to, or you can direct them should they become stuck or should they need an extra prompt as well. Now, one thing I always used to do is I always used to carefully pick my word mats that I wanted to use so that they were transferable from each of my genres as well. So that, again, for those that are struggling, they're not having to learn new skills all the time. They're just reapplying and reusing across different genres as well. Don't forget, it's important to make sure you've still got dictionaries, your thesaurus is available, and boys love this. And again, I've got my copy here locked away because it's like gold dust. But again, if you do manage to have a look on eBay or Amazon, because they can be quite expensive, is trying to get hold of yourself a Descriptosaurus book. Honestly, every year my children clamour over this, and it is chock-a-block full of descriptive phrases as well. You may find that someone's got one in your school, and if you do, ask if you can photocopy sections or passages whenever you're doing some big writing or creative writing, because it's fantastic to give them ideas as well. It's called Descriptosaurus. I'm not plugging it, I don't get any money from it, but it's a really fantastic book to help develop creative writing as well. And furthermore, again, I don't advocate spending money. I know how much we do spend as teachers. But again, if you are in some particular shops, I know, for example, Wilko's and Wilkinson's, they obviously have like a little area, and sometimes they have these how to write storybooks, how to write English, how to do these little guides. They're only £1 or £2, and sometimes I pick them up, and there's some nice little activities which I put on areas as well, and they've been quite good in my classroom previously. Alternatively, if you're higher up the school, the Rising Stars SATS books are nice to have out on display because they can direct people to certain grammatical skills that you may want to put into their writing. But having a station is really nice for children to refer to and go to should they become stuck in their writing as well. So as we look at pre-teaching activities for developing creativity in your writing, this is designed to be your lesson 1, your lesson 2. And again, it could be pre-teaching. You might decide to do it the week before you go into your writing, or again, it could be part of an immersive experience as a wow day or a wow afternoon. These are there to give the children a chance to go into your writing with that knowledge or prior knowledge so that they are on the same level field as other children as well. So first one, as we always say, is we do follow the power of reading. So it's really important that we are using quality first, high quality text to expose children to a wide bank of vocabulary, expose children to key concepts and themes as well. And it's also really important, especially now coming back out of lockdown, that we safeguard that time to read to children. Read them the story. And I don't mean sometimes getting children to read as a class. It's nice for an actual adult to say, oh, do you know what, I'm going to read to you. And that way we can model the intonation, we can model those phrases, we can explain things to children, and therefore they're having a chance to hear a story and magpie along the way. Now, I know lots of classes and different schools do different approaches, but sometimes it's nice to give children a journal, and when they're listening along to reading, they can write down keywords or key phrases. So they're almost building up their own mini dictionary, which they can use in their creative writing. That's a really key idea. And it's also key to train children that they don't have to write words. Sometimes it could be images, pictures, what comes into their head, what can they imagine? So that way they can transfer that into their writing. I'm a big believer in the art that it should be taught alongside reading and writing, because again, it's that creative, imaginative approach. So Other books to support children that struggle with creativity is taking them back to the original stories, those familiar stories that we know when we were taught as children, fairy tales, nursery rhymes. There's a reason why these are taught in EYFS in Key Stage 1, is because these are the building blocks to the stories that we then read later on in life as adults as well. These are the stories that break down the familiar themes, whether it is a hero going on a journey, whether it is a character overcoming a problem, whether it is a character having to find a solution. These are the key archetypal stories. So take them back to those ideas and get them to retell them, possibly from a different perspective. Get them to retell them by adding in a new character or adapting a character and using the familiar themes themselves. Now, some of the best ones on the market is The True Story of the Three Little Pigs or Snow White in New York. These are fantastic at showing children how they can take a familiar story and change either the perspective or change the character as well. And for those struggling writing, those who struggle to develop their ideas, what they are seeing is actually that innovation in process as well. And these are a really nice way to start the creative writing process. One thing I did during the recent lockdown is I got the children in year 6, and you'll be surprised what book I used, but is I got them to actually look at the Gruffalo, and I actually got them then to start to adapt that and transform it into a more appropriate book for a higher level children as well. And that worked a really nice way because they were familiar with the story, they were familiar with the approach and the thematic themes of the SMAP, and therefore they were able to make their adaptations and changes along the way as well. And slowly they start to move away, and then that becomes the innovation stage as well. So adapting familiar writing tropes, themes and genres, explore significant or reoccurring writing themes with the children and allow them to use that knowledge already acquired to play around and adapt for their own purpose. So again, those fantasy quest journey stories, our character is going to go on a quest, therefore we need to face a problem. So again, we can talk about that problem, we can draw and create that problem, and then we can find that solution as well. Mystery science fiction, again, finding clues. It's really nice that one of the things I did before with a mystery and detective is we actually set up mini clues around the school, got children to act that out along the way, so that when they went into that writing process, they had learned through play. And again, the traditional fairy tales and nursery rhymes. So these are just a couple of picture books that I've used during my teaching time. And I'm not saying that these are the best of the best. I'm sure there are many more on the market, but each of these lend themselves really well to teaching creative writing along the way. Picture books are fantastic because, again, they're short, they don't contain a lot of writing, and the pictures allow a lot of discussion and a lot of stimulation for children's creativity and imagination. Each one can be used in a variety of ways, whether it is fiction or non-fiction, and sometimes it's nice to include that alongside your power of reading book. So again, planning that in advance, knowing when you want to use these books, and they are a really good way to develop creativity. So just a couple of examples. Leon on the Place Between, very popular, about a little boy who goes to a circus and meets a magician. Now the imagery in that lends itself really well to descriptive writing. What would happen if you went inside the magic circus? What would happen if you tumbled inside the magician's cape? Where would you end up? What place might you end up? Again, it allows that approach of where could it go as well. For younger children, and again for early Key Stage 2, Year 3, The Day the Crayons Quit, those crayons coming to life and giving letters and sending those letters and receiving those letters is a nice analogy for children to be able to respond to. What would you do if you received a letter? What would you do if you were to write a letter? It's giving those children those writing prompts along the way as well. Another one for the older children is Ice Trap or Skyward. These again set during the early 1900s, and it allows the children to really think about going on a journey. What would you do on that journey? What problems would you face? What would it be like to face those problems as well? And again, the language there is simple enough for children to understand, but there is complex for them to glean and use in their writing. Now, as I said, there's lots here for you to choose from. And again, it's worth having a look at where you could possibly put in some of these creative writing prompts to generate the ideas. Furthermore, using the power of reading and using extracts is really key. So Using a quality extract allows you to explore the layout and the way that information and ideas have been organised, discuss and highlight specific grammatical features and literary devices, ask children to draw out sections. And again, this is fantastic. One of my favourite lessons to do is in year 3, and you're reading the Iron Man to the children. And as you're reading that description, I want children to draw it out. What can you imagine as you hear those words? And it really allows them to understand that vocabulary, understand that process that the author is showing them through the writing as well. It's also quite a nice point to use as a jumping off point. Predict what might happen next. Let's take on that journey of that character and write the next paragraph. Let's write the next page as well. So again, for those reluctant writers, for those who are not good in terms of their creativity, you've already given them a character, you've given them a protagonist, you've given them a setting. They're now having to continue that journey as well. So some of those building blocks have been given to them, scaffolded, and they're then having to move on in their own way as well. So as always, just to give you some ideas, here are 6 of my best. There are many more out there and many more that I use, but these are some of the 6 I use regularly when teaching across the key stages. So Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, chapters 1, 2 and 3. There's a whole chapter based on Diagon Alley as well. But there's some really lovely character descriptive phrases, paragraphs, extracts, and setting descriptions within that first section of that book. So should you be looking for something to explore with the children, really pull apart, there's some brilliant pages in there as well. Have a look out for Hagrid and Professor McGonagall. And again, that Diagon Alley, that first page, is really rich with language. The next one, which you saw on the previous page, is The Explorer by Catherine Rundle. The opening chapters are incredible. It really sets the scene for going on a journey. And then, I'm sorry to spoil it for you, but the plane does crash. And unfortunately, the children are left exploring the jungle on their own. And at that point, you've now got a basis to give to those children what's going to happen next as well. Can we now write what dangers they may face? Firework Maker's Daughter, one of my favourite books to work with across a key stage, lower key stage 2. It's only 7 chapters, so therefore it's quite short, but each chapter is specific in its description, whether it's describing the main characters, the setting of China. So again, it's that cultural capital that we're providing for children. I mentioned it earlier, but the Iron Man, again, it's got wonderful description language in there. For upper key stage, we've got Wolf Brother, which is a very powerful book about loss, but the description in there is very rich and vivid. And the descriptions of the forest allow a lot of children to kind of immerse themselves in there as well. And then the final one, which is a new one I've started using, called The Girl Who Stole an Elephant. This is perfect to immerse children in a different country, expose them to foreign landscapes, and to show them a wide range of descriptive phrases they may not be familiar with as well. Now, for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, there are plenty of books for you to choose from as well. And rather than me go through them, I've directed you to this website here. It's a brilliant website, free to sign up. It's called Authority. Now, Authority has a link to hundreds of different authors who have submitted extracts for you to use, whether it's in early years, Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2. And they're really nice to pick apart with the children when developing creative writing as well. So, coming back to those pre-teaching ideas, children find it easier to write about things they know about, have seen or experienced. So again, it's that first-hand experience. It's hard to ask a child to write a story or any type of writing if they do not know anything about it. Again, an example here is, imagine asking children to write about the seaside if they've never been. You as a teacher are going to have to work 10 times harder to provide every single experience for them as well. So try to make sure that they have first-hand experiences. And if they don't, think about how you can plan that in for those children as well. Those wow moments where children can immerse themselves before writing and then draw upon that experience. So I know at the moment we're kind of restricted in terms of our local and wider trips, but what we can do is still do those virtual VR activities, taking them around the world virtually. Hands-on experiment, this week's been perfect for that in terms of Science Week. Drawing in-class visitors or practical hands-on activities. So one of those is practical play. And again, drawing upon the experience of Key Stage 1 here, practical play is fantastic to help children generate ideas. Dressing up allows them to act out, it allows them to perform, it allows them to use their drama skills to really think about getting in the role of that character as well. How did they feel? How did they act? How did they behave? How might they react to a situation as well? Learning through play is fundamental in developing children's understanding and knowledge, especially if they are unfamiliar or they've never experienced something before. I do know that as we get up at the school in upper key stage 5 and 6, sometimes children are quite reluctant, but actually when faced in the situation, they do transform and they suddenly become a child again, as they should. So try to include that immersive play as much as possible. Act out scenarios, be creative, and you can do that through various roles. Maybe take it in turns. One person asks the question, one person listens, one person does some hot seating. All of those things as well are really key to allowing children to stimulate creativity. Big shout out to Cheam Park Farm last week, whereas all the teachers dressed up as wolves as part of their story Wolf Brother as well. And again, it was really nice then to stimulate the ideas for the children, because if they could see the adults getting involved, they wanted to get involved too as well. So a couple of things on the board. These are just my top favorites as well. But again, having a dressing up area. Again, it's not appropriate for every classroom all the time, but it's nice for children to have that experience. They can get up, dress up, play around, toy boxes, things that they can kinesthetically touch, play around as well. Props, artifacts, the Victorians dressing up in their boxes and their clothes, in their hats. World War II, we have the gas masks, we have the little evacuee boxes. Children can experience what it's like. They can touch it around, touch it, play with it, do all those things as well. Again, similar when we do the Romans and the Viking days as well. All of those are key for children to then draw into their writing. Using artifacts and real life objects are really fantastic as well. One of the things that I've done previously is I wanted children to write what it was like to hunt an animal. We were very fortunate to have an archery set. So I took my children outside and I got them to practice doing archery lessons as well. When they came back into the classroom, they knew what it felt like to pull that bow back. They knew what it felt like to feel the arrow go past their face. All of that was then put into their writing. So getting them to have first-hand experiences is really lovely. This one's quite surprising. I've done it all the way up in year 5 and 6, putting a tent in the middle of your classroom and asking children to get inside that tent. Because for many of them, they may not have done that. And actually having that moment, taking that time out of my week and saying, let's do this, let's put these things in play, children were more experienced. They had that knowledge. Taste testing, smelling, using your 5 senses. These are all really nice ways to help encourage that creativity as well, especially if you want to give a sense of an environment or a setting as well. Nature, taking them outside, what can you find? How does it feel? Potion making is a lovely one. And if you are creative or you know someone creative, get them to make you props as well. Again, these are really popular. I've done it before, making dragon's eggs, giving each child a different dragon egg that they then got to imagine what's inside, what type of dragon might it be based on the design of an egg. And again, it doesn't have to be dragons. It could be anything, mermaid scales, a giant's footprint in the middle of your classroom, setting it up like a crime scene. Who might have been attacked? What might have happened? It's giving them those experiences for them to draw upon as well. Another one is pre-teaching is through your character maps, drawing and annotating ideas as well. And again, I always say this, and again, it makes me sad sometimes when this happens, is you still have to model this to the children. Don't expect them just to create a character, say, look, draw one. Here's half an hour, off you go. You still have to model that with the children, because again, for those reluctant writers, those who are lacking creativity, they can struggle. So give them parts that are already pre-drawn for them. It could be actually, I want your character to be a male, or I want your character to be a female. I want your character to be from this particular culture. Start to set those boundaries so that they are already having those building blocks in place as well, and draw alongside them. Most classrooms now have visualizers, so it allows them to see what you're doing and you can model that to the children. Drawing characters and settings is fantastic because it really allows them to take that ownership. But as I said before, put in those barriers, put in those scaffolded links, because otherwise what you could end up with is an alien in a medieval story as well. So again, you've got to make sure that they are clear on what is appropriate for the text that they are writing as well. Character interviews is a really popular one as well. So getting in the mind of your character. Once you've drawn it, put them on the stand and let other children ask them questions. They then have to think, well, actually, how would my character respond? What would my character say? And already they're now starting to have to think about their character as a 3-dimensional form as well. Again, it's good to model this, And it's good to also do this in pairs or in groups. So again, if children are more shy or they're not too confident, they then don't have to worry about the whole class as well. You may want to give those children the questions that you want to ask, dot them around the room. Underneath your desk, I've given you a question. That's your question to ask today. So again, you're pre-planning and you're pre-putting that in place for those children as well. We also have a variety of fantastic websites where you can draw upon creative stimuluses as well. Literacy Shed, Once Upon a Picture, and Pobble are all really fantastic because they contain video clips, audio sound bites, pictures, images, and photographs for you to use to prompt that discussion with children. Now, Pobble is fantastic because their photographs are almost real-life photographs enhanced with fantasy or make-believe in some way. And this allows children to look at it, really think about, actually, if this was the real-world situation, what would happen next? Where would this take us? Once Upon a Picture is a little bit more cartoony, a bit more hand-drawn, but the images there are fantastic to allow children to immerse themselves in that world as well. Literacy Shed, I should say, sorry, is very good in terms of their clips that they have on hand. There's lots of short videos, and should you plan a creative unit, you might want to take one of those, do it over 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks, and again, children can watch it, they can rewind it, they can take themselves back to those moments, and you can really lead them along the way based on what you want them to write. Furthermore, you have got BBC Bite Size that has some great videos, YouTube, again, video dependent, and Authority as well. So this then comes on to the planning activities when you want to plan all those ideas for children to start to write with. So, as always, graphic organisers allow children to think through their writing before they start. And there are a variety of ways that children can organise their writing. Story maps, story planning forms. There's loads of ways that they can incorporate that. So I'm just going to go through some of my top tips and some of my favourite ones that I've used and how they can be used across the key stages. So old and very traditional, but again, it's still very useful, is that story map, especially for those narrative journey quests, taking children from the beginning stages and working their way through. Dependent on your children, you could give them parts of that story map. You could give them elements of it to begin with. Again, you could give them widgets, pictures. You could even ask them to draw it out as well. They don't have to always write it. So again, it's how you interpret that, and it allows them to clearly see, well, actually, what's going to happen at this point, what's going to happen at the end, how am I going to start that story as well. Planning activities using post-it notes is really fun because what it allows the children to do is write down their ideas and reorganize them to make sure that they're in the correct order, or again, to make sure that they flow and that they make sense as well. It's also quite nice working in teams because every child is then having that instant access. They're putting their ideas on their post-it notes and then having to work out how to match it up as well. You as a teacher can also scaffold that, and you can also put in certain parameters. I'm going to give you my first post-it note. You now need to write the second post-it note. I'm now going to give you the next one. You then have to follow that on as well. And actually what they're doing for you is you are partly structuring that creativity. You're giving them that input. They're then carrying that on as well. And then what you should slowly do as the year progresses is start to remove those scaffolds, because hopefully they're then building up their own bank. But for those children that don't have enough, you may need to kind of give them those prompts beforehand. Visual story map, love it. It's one of my favorite things to use, where children can draw out those story maps and they can annotate them as they go as well. I'm not going to kind of go into too much detail for these. I speak about these quite a lot. I'm a big fan of them, but should you wish to have a little look, it's worth checking out Pi Corbett's Visual Story Map videos, which are online, and also having a look at the many examples on there as well. The one question I always get asked is, what if I am not a very good artist or I can't draw? Don't panic, because children are able to do it, and you can do it too. Stick images, or worst case scenario is just print out the images that you want beforehand and then kind of blue tack them onto the sheet as you go as well. Diamond nines, getting children to organise their most important ideas in their story from their least important ideas. This is a nice way then for children to cull what they don't need. If it's the least important, get rid of it as well. So it really allows them to focus on those most important aspects as well. Comic strips and sentence organizers. It's a really nice way to actually make sure that children can move their work around. And again, you can also insert your own sentences that children have to lead from as well. And then we're also very fortunate now that we do have technology. So things like sound recording devices, Screencastify, Read and Write, and Mote, all of these, children don't have to plan using the written resources. They can plan orally. They can talk through their ideas as well. So make sure that you're using a variety of those ICT technology tools as well. Okay, so support now in class and support during the actual lesson. We're going into the writing stage. Children are struggling. What do we do as well? So remove the barriers and encourage creative freedom. And this is quite shocking. I'm the director of English, and I'm saying actually remove the barriers. If you want children to write creatively, then actually remove the process that you want them to write. Say to a child, all I want you to do in 15 minutes is just to write me a story or write me a description. Don't tell them what skills that you want them to do. Don't worry about whether they have included fronted adverbials or included a range of noun phrases. Just get them to describe. Then once they've done that, go back and this time do the lesson in reverse. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the piece that you've written and we're now going to improve it. We're now going to up-level it as well. And what this allows them to do is to free flow all their ideas down. And then once it's down, they can then start to unpick and they can then start to go back and start to add things in. And that's where you as the teacher can then model that as well. It's that conscious write versus the unconsciousness of what they're putting in as well. I said this before during today's session as well, is providing children a start and or an end point as well. Children do struggle creatively if they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the building blocks required. So as a teacher, we may want to give them the beginning of their writing so that they know where they're starting from as well. Providing children with a set of perimeters will help them be able to then structure what you need to include. So these could be, for example, providing the opening paragraph and then children having to continue. Providing the first and last line of the story or the first line of each paragraph. Therefore, children know where they've got to aim for and they're kind of almost filling in that blank as well. Alternatively, provide the end to the story. So actually, you know how it's got to end, but how are we going to get there as well? This is again, it's removing one of those stages so that children are having to have less focus and they can be more specific on what you want them to do. Alternatively, provide children with a skeleton plan. This is your character, this is your setting, they must do this, and they must end up here. Children are then having to work with that scaffold, and then they can fill in the more descriptive parts along the way. And should they feel they're more confident, they can then start to adapt as they need to as well. Circle writing is a really fun way to do. And again, if you're feeling confident with your class and you know that your class are able to do this, this is a really fun activity for you to take part in. Usually set them up into groups of 4 to 6. Give them the topic that you want them to talk about or the story you want them to write about. Give them picture cards. You might have it on the board. You might discuss it as well. Or give them a sentence to start them off. Again, that beginning sentence, end sentence. It must start here and the last person must end here as well. And then you as a teacher will say go. And then the children will take turns writing their part. And as soon as it's then the next person's time, they have to pass it on. They have to read and then they have to carry the story on as well. Now, for the weaker, reluctant writers, what I would always suggest is make sure that they are person number 4 or person number 5, so that actually the more stronger writers have started the story. They've already felt like, oh, we're on a flow here. So when it gets around to their time, they're already hearing and they're immersed in what they need to do. They've also had more time to think about it and more time then to put in their writing as well. Other ways that you can do this is shared paired writing. One person talks, the other person writes, then swapping it over as well, taking it in turns, because then that person has to listen to the more confident writer, write it down, and then when they have a go, they've already been modeled to by their peers. Therefore, they can say, actually, I want this to continue. This is how it's going to be as well. And it's a nice activity to share along the way. Really popular along with Key Stage 1 and lower Key Stage is that rolling of the dice, providing children with tools or resources where they then have to kind of base their stories dependent on the fate of the dice as well. And you can make these yourself, you can print these off, there's loads online. I know Twinkle do lots of variations of this as well, but you can also do it in terms of writing prompts. You could give them key vocabulary. If you roll a 6, you have to use these words. If you roll a 4, you have to use these grammatical features. So again, you can vary it up and do different ways in terms of exposing children to different ways to creative inputs into their writing. You can also adapt this with prompt cards, matrix grids, and other tables where children have to choose from as well. Sentence starters and writing sentence starters, again, they were very popular a couple of years ago. They seem to have phased out, but they are really nice to give to children because they're almost then having to work their way across, piece the ideas together, and then embed it in their own work in some way as well. Ones that I've done recently is the number of words challenge. If you've got a reluctant writer and a child who struggles with creativity, limit the number of words that you wish them to use in their writing. This again makes them having to think more carefully about what they're putting in. So again, they don't end off in a tangent, they're not going off in a waffle. They're actually having to be more specific on what they put from pen to paper. So when asking a child to complete a writing task, set that limit. A popular one is those 200-word stories. Again, you could do it in a variety of ways. If you were this character, what would you send out as a tweet? You've got 40 words. What might they say? Short newspaper articles? Or again, putting their story on 6 Post-it notes. You have to start at the beginning, has to end on your 6th Post-it note. You can only have 1 sentence per Post-it note. What are you going to say? How are you going to write your story? Because once they've got those 6 Post-it notes, then later lessons, they can take one and they can expand on it. They can build on it. They can give more information as well. But once they've got those building blocks, those skeleton parts, then they can take it further. If you want to have a look at more 200-word challenges, head over to Adobe Sparks. They're Writing for Change. There are about over 10 to 20 different 200-word writing challenges. They provide you all of the resources that you need. There are boards, there are videos, there are clips that you can watch, and they can help you take you through. There's some really nice ones there, should you wish to help develop children further in their creativity. This is a really popular one that I've been trying recently, and it's worked really well with some of the children I've taught during the lockdown. It's called Target Writing, and it's almost like an old bullseye board. Normally have about 3 to 4 rings around your bullseye, depending on the age of your children and their ability. And then what you do is from the outer ring to the central ring, you allocate a certain point, starting from small points from the outer ring to the bigger points. So from 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point. On each ring, you then give them something that they are to include in their writing. Now, you give them something quite basic and quite simple on the outer ring. It could be, for example, a grammatical feature. It could be a key vocabulary, or it could be a key character or kind of imagery you want them to use. And then the more complex, more trickier skills, you put that in the center of the ring as well. Children then have some timed limit. Can you now write me a paragraph? Can you now do this? And what you're then doing is you're challenging them to include these features. What you're secretly doing is you're actually giving them all of the ideas that they need. And therefore, you're removing that barrier to creativity because you're already giving it to them. They're then having to think how to piece it together, how to include it in an imaginative way. At the end of the session, children can then pair up. And for them, they simply think that they are tallying up the points. How many have I included? Who's got the best scores? But what they're actually doing is they're peer editing their work. Their partners can say to them, actually, that's not correct. This is how it should be. Let's change it. You can get the point. And therefore, it's a nice, fun way to do that peer editing when you're looking at a creative piece as well. Writing cycles. The writing cycle really gives a sense of collaboration with their classmates as well. And again, it's taking them through that process. If you're going to go down the creative route, set yourself an appropriate amount of time. If you're going to do it every Friday, a bit like the old-fashioned big writes that we used to do many years ago, again, stick to that writing process. This Friday, we're going to create our characters. Next week, we're then going to start our setting. Week 3, we're then going to have a look at planning our story map. Week 4, and it's something that children can keep coming back to. Alternatively, another way to do the writing cycle is you ask children to write on lesson 1, and then the following week we come back to it. We're going to add a new skill and we're going to rewrite it. Then on week 3, we're going to add a new skill and rewrite it again. And you're constantly going back and revisiting a piece and up-leveling it each and every time, so that by the end of each half term, children have 6 pieces of fully developed creative writing that they can then look at and see from the beginning to the last piece how much it's improved as well. Lovely one, this one again, but it is that limitation that we've spoken about before, 6-sentence paragraphs. Again, it doesn't have to be 6 sentences, but it could be 5 sentences or 8 sentences, or you could do a mixture, 4, 6, 4. But what you're doing is you're actually getting children to focus on that detail, and they're concentrating on what they're putting into their writing as well. Also focus on giving them certain other limitations as well, whether it's contracted words, whether it's not to include certain features as well. Creativity, by reducing the amount that they need to write, it allows them to focus exactly on what they do need to include as well. Next one is banning keywords and phrases, and this is a really great way for children to think about how they can approach a task creatively, but when certain words are removed. So to make children consciously consider the words or phrases that they use at the start of a lesson, ban certain words. For example, if you want to vary sentence openers and really try and show a variety of openings that children could use, tell them they're not allowed to use the word the. It's a really great way to get in your subordinating clauses, prepositional phrases, and your similes straight away. Alternatively, if you want to encourage the wider use of conjunctions, ban the words like and or but. Therefore, we've got to now think of more formal words that we can use instead. The same can be said, again, this is a very old-fashioned one, we say said is dead. So you not using the word said and thinking about alternate verbs to how characters may speak. Or alternatively, tell children what they must use. For every noun that you must use, you must cover it with an adjective or 3. So again, giving them a paragraph, can you now write from that as well? And that's really nice to do, this activity, if you're giving them a picture prompt, because actually you're only asking them to write a paragraph. Let's look at that picture. What's happening in that picture? What are you going to tell me? You're not allowed to use the word the. You're not allowed to use the word and. You can't use any word that contains the letter S. And straight away, they're then having to challenge themselves and think more outside the box as well. That, by the way, trying to do it by removing a letter is very hard as well. I think I asked children to write a piece without the letter E, and it was pandemonium. So always think about what you're asking them to do, first of all. Teacher taught work is key, and it's that imitation, innovation, and inventing stage as well. So if you want children to write creatively, then you are going to need to model that so that children can imitate it. And one thing that is my bugbear is when we say to children, right, let's write a story, off you go. If they don't have that knowledge, they are not going to be able to write it. They're going to struggle as well. So model that to them and say that this is my story opener. Now, can you write yours? How can you adapt that stage as well? What words could you change? What sentence might you begin to innovate? What sections might you invent next as well? Giving them that structure, that scaffolding along the way as well. And then as we come to the end as well, please don't forget, for any child who struggles creatively, vocabulary word maps, keywords, alternate synonyms, all of these are nice ways to generate. Furthermore, having a bank of pictures that your children can refer to. These are the characters in our story. These are what pictures might look like. These are images. All of that is key to generating those ideas. Use of widgets, having story writing toolboxes, having those flashcards for children that struggle at the last minute. The use of whiteboards. And then finally, use of ICT. Said it many times today, is that use of drawing. It's really important for children to draw out their ideas creatively. Rereading their work, so again, they can hear what they've written. And then finally, praising those children. What they do, they're working hard in that classroom, and sometimes they're probably working harder than you think, especially if they're having to overcome those many barriers. So give them that praise. Well done when they're achieving things, because actually 9 times out of 10, the more praise you give them, the more they will want to achieve as well. And that brings us up to our end of our slides for today as well. So a whistle-stop tour on developing creativity within our writing. Lots to think about, lots to take away, but hopefully it's given you one golden nugget that you can take back to your classroom or take back to your teaching and think, actually, let's try this one thing today as well to help improve that creativity as well. My golden nugget is choosing high quality texts, choosing what you're reading to children, and providing them with a stimulus and a scaffolding block as well. If you can start with those, then you're already 9 times of the way there as well. That's it for me. Thank you very much for listening. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat function as we go. If not, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Hope you have found it interesting. I hope you found something of importance that you can take back. Otherwise, have a wonderful evening, and I shall hopefully see you all very soon as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.